All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are breaking down a really tough investigation into a federally funded contractor called the Children's Village. And what was uncovered? Well, it's a story of systemic abuse, of corporate secrecy, and, you guessed it, millions of your taxpayer dollars.
This right here, this is how investigators described a room they found at the heart of the facility. Now, this wasn't some standard timeout room, no. This was something else entirely. They called it the Red Room.
And the design of this room was deliberate. It was chillingly intentional. It all started with the floor, which was painted this stark, disorienting red. Then, to make it even more intense, the walls were completely covered in red carpet. You can just imagine how that would absorb all sound and create this claustrophobic, sensory-overloaded nightmare. And the final touch? The only light in the entire room came from one single overhead red light, which just bathed the whole cell in this oppressive crimson glow. So, what exactly happened inside this purpose-built cell? The details that came out of the Dobbs-Ferry facility are they're beyond chilling. They reveal the systematic method of punishment that completely bypassed every safety protocol you could think of. Kids were watched constantly from a security office right next door. One teenager reported being locked in that room for 4 days straight. 4 days. He wasn't allowed to bathe, and all they fed him was bread. And get this was all enforced by this rogue security team they called the Special Unit, who were also known to physically beat the children, throwing them to the floor and putting them in restraints. And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How could this go on for so long? The thing is, this wasn't some big secret. The system wasn't just failing these kids. In a way, it was designed to look the other way. Because that Red Room, it wasn't just some one-off isolated incident. Not even close. When you actually look at the history of the Children's Village, you start to see this deeply disturbing, decades-long pattern of violence and institutional failure. Just look at how this unfolds over the years. Back in 2003, you have staff holding a child down so they could be assaulted. Fast forward to 2014, a worker gets arrested for strangling a 13-year-old. Then in 2019, a federal audit comes out that is just damning. By 2021, lawsuits are exposing systemic sexual abuse. In 2024, an employee is convicted of rape. And then, finally, in 2026, the Red Room is exposed. You just can't deny that pattern. Now, let's zoom in on that 2019 federal audit for a second. The government's own investigators went through 50 case files, and out of those 50, they found that the contractor failed to meet basic care requirements in 46 of them. 46 out of 50, that is a 92% failure rate. The federal government knew there were massive problems years ago. And while these kids were being abused, guess what the contractor was doing? Cashing in. That very same federal audit uncovered this absolutely staggering number. That's right, $2.6 million. That's how much taxpayer money the contractor claimed in what's called unallowable expenditures. So while children in their care were being beaten and starved, millions in federal funds were just being drained into corporate accounts. So you have to ask yourself, how on earth does an organization hide this level of abuse, this level of financial misconduct, right out in the open? Well, the answer lies in this really complex system of corporate shells that are basically designed to create a transparency black hole. The key to the whole scheme is something called an LLC drop site. The easiest way to think about it is like a corporate P.O. box. It's one single physical address that acts as the official home for countless different companies. It makes trying to trace who owns what or who's liable for what almost impossible. And we're not just talking about some abstract idea here. Investigators actually trace this whole web of companies to one notorious drop site, located right here, 93 4th Avenue in Manhattan. So how many different companies are registered to that one single address? Thousands. It's a perfect illustration of how our federal grant money can just disappear into this tangled web of shell companies, making any kind of real oversight a complete nightmare. So why go to all this trouble? Right? Why create all these confusing corporate layers? The reason, when you get down to it, is devastatingly simple. And here it is. This is the whole ballgame. Because they operate as private companies, even though they're bankrolled by us, the taxpayers, they are exempt from public records requests. The federal government gives them the money, but the private company gets to keep all the records, incident logs, restraint reports, all of it, locked away behind this impenetrable wall of privatization. But here's the good news. That wall, it's not as invincible as they want you to think. The very same public records that are used to build these shell companies can be used to tear them down. Investigators have actually laid out a clear blueprint for how to pierce this veil of secrecy. And here it is. It's a 5-step method, and here's the thing. Anyone with an internet connection can use these tools. 1. You map the corporate shells using state business databases. 2. You track the federal grants to see where our tax dollars are really going. 3. You pull the state licensing and inspection records. 4. You file targeted Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, requests with federal agencies like the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the ORR. And 5, the final step. You cross-reference everything, and that's where you start to see the patterns of abuse and financial grift.
The big takeaway here is that we're not helpless. Accountability is actually within our reach. The whole system is designed to look confusing, to look intimidating, but the tools we need to pull back the curtain and demand transparency, they're publicly available to all of us.
And really, that's what this all comes down to. The paper trail is there. The grants, the audits, the inspection violations, the lawsuits, it all exists. The facts have been recorded, and once they're in the book, the ledger cannot be unwritten.